All right, hi Breakout Room Watchers. Thanks for joining today's webinar. So we're doing something new today, and we're going to be trying out our own live webinars. We think it'll be a really fun way to connect you with great thinkers and companies. So today I'm really excited to be joined by Kaitlyn White, Vice President of Strategy from Dragon Army. And today Kaitlyn's going to be presenting on infusing game theory in your mobile marketing mix. I couldn't be more thrilled to have Kaitlyn join us today. Dragon Army's taking a really incredible approach to how they're thinking about gaming, and marketing, just a really, really neat approach to how to infuse gaming and mobile into your marketing mix. So Kaitlyn, welcome. And I guess before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about Dragon Army and yourself?
Great, yeah, and we'll get into some of that as we go into the slides, but as Adam said, I'm Kaitlyn. Work over here at Dragon Army. We're based in Atlanta, and basically the way that we're set up is we are part game studio and part mobile agency. So came together with two companies about a little over a year ago and really saw the need for what the game studio was able to develop for games direct to consumers and the types of experiences that they were creating and some of the mechanics that the game theory side was leveraging and how we could see applying that to the marketing side. So that's a little bit of what we're tinkering around with now and what we're presenting back to clients in the mobile experiences that we create. So I'll get into a little bit of how we do that and how we're set up, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, excellent. So my favorite Dragon Army game is actually Defend the Dam. I'm still trying to beat the last level, but if you haven't checked out Defend the Dam, it's on the App Store. It's a great game. So I'm excited to see, Kaitlyn, what you have to share with us. I'll let you take it away from here.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump in. So I told you a little bit of a brief overview from our story, but I'll give you a little bit more of a background into the name. That's always kind of fun. So Dragon Army is a fun one. So we come from kind of the background, if you've seen the movie or read the book Ender's Game. So Dragon Army was kind of the team of underdogs, and they were looking to go a little bit further, to do a little bit more, and that's kind of how we position ourselves in the marketplace, is coming at things from a new perspective, looking at mobile in a new light, and really infusing, like I said, some of those practices from the game side and how we can take those learnings and apply those to really great brand experiences in mobile. So some of the brands that we work with, so we've done work with Red Bull, Delta, Coca-Cola, so a lot of those big ones here in Atlanta, doing some really fun stuff right now with Intercontinental Hotels, some fun stuff with Home Depot around College Game Day. But like I said, the unique thing that we feel like is different about us is we have this in-house game incubator. So almost serving as their own independent team. As Adam said, we're developing branded titles for direct to consumers. So Defend the Dam is one of those. Robots Love Ice Cream is another one of our titles. And the team over there is constantly tinkering and coming up with new ideas and fresh thinking just to put out directly to consumers. On the other side of the house, we have the agency side, which is typical as you would think in terms of advertising or marketing agencies and the types of experiences that we create, that we're creating them specifically for mobile. So what we really feel is that marketers today are missing the boat on mobile. As we came up from our web days and creating web experiences, there was kind of this one-track mind of I can create an experience, you go out and deploy it, and it's ready and set to go. Mobile's really changed that for us. So we've seen from a marketing perspective just this gap that exists in the marketplace today on how do we create really great mobile experiences that don't create that abandonment rate that we're really seeing today. So we feel like the gap there is that marketers are focused on the screen. You're focused on what can I create on the device that my consumer has in front of them. And what we really feel like is missing is focusing on kind of that outside world around you. So how can the device not only become an experience that's set in front of you, but can enhance the world around you? And those are the types of things that we're looking to create. So in today's world, we really feel like there's kind of this gap between consumer expectations and brand realities. So a couple things here that we like to dive into as we're putting together plans for some of our branded partners. You look at things like communication versus content. So there's a lot of talk today in the industry around content strategy and the content that I need to put out there. In mobile, it's not just about the content that I put out, but the communication that I create. And we oftentimes relate this back towards even the communication strategy that a corporation may have had from their traditional PR days. What are the ways that we can communicate back and forth with media, with consumers? And that's really where we've gotten to with mobile, where you see the influx of things like messaging apps, different types of brand experiences that allow for that two-way dialogue. The second piece here that's really informed a lot from our game side is exploration versus instruction. I think as marketers, it's our tendency to put together that list of what do we want our consumers to do, what's the path we want them to go down, and mobile has screwed all of that up. There is no longer a path to purchase. There's no single journey. So really for us, it's how do we create an experience where we're encouraging consumers to explore, where we're letting them jump in at any given point and they're able to kind of move from one point to the next seamlessly. And then finally, experiences versus destinations. And I think we saw this even in the infancy of mobile in the last couple of years of it's our tendency to go out and create that single branded app or create that single mobile website. And what we're starting to see now is a little bit more diversity in the mobile space. So how do we create an experience that's distinct and is very clear for the consumer and what they want? The other piece that we like to make sure that we control for is setting our goals in the upfront when it comes to creating an experience. So oftentimes that means an experience could be something that only sticks around for a month or two, that we really only want people to use for a shortened period of time. But setting those expectations and what the experience is that we want to create helps us to be more successful in the long run. So what we really feel coming out of this is disruptive mobile experiences fail. So those experiences that take you out of the world around you, that ask you to do something that's not in line with your daily life, those are the experiences that don't work. Those are the experiences that only get picked up once and never get picked up again. So we believe instead of that, that mobile, when it's done well, should really amplify the world around us. It should be an extension of our brand, of ourselves, and really create that transaction and that translation between the brand and the consumer. So how do we do that? So getting into the fun stuff a little bit around game theory. So the way that we've started to look at this is we've got to stop thinking like marketers. Stop thinking in terms of, what do I want to create for the brand? What's the brand's goal at the end of the day? And of course, those things are incredibly important. But starting to look at how do we flip our mindset a little bit differently. So the way that we found to do that is to start acting like gamers. And like I said, as the infancy of Dragon Army kind of started as a pure game studio. And it wasn't until we really got deep in the weeds of creating these games and experiences that a light bulb went off and said, these guys are thinking a little bit differently. They create experiences so differently than we've ever approached them from a marketing standpoint. So how could we take a little bit of those learnings and apply that into the processes that we face as marketers every day? So this is a quote. If you haven't read the book, Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal. Jane has one of those kind of dream jobs that we all kind of seek. She has a very consultative role looking at what do games create and what are the emotions that they elicit in their players. So I love this quote from the book, which says that games are showing us exactly what we want out of life: more satisfying work, better hope of success, stronger social connectivity, and the chance to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. So if we look at the amount of time that users are spending within games, that they're spending within these virtual experiences, and you start to think about what are the human behaviors, what are the emotional connections and triggers that creates, that's where it starts to get really interesting from both a behavioral and a psychological experience perspective. So today's marketplace from gaming really proves this to be true, and this is we feel like as we go through kind of with clients or in different talks that we've done, this is that slide that really kind of gets you thinking. And even for me, I'm not a huge gamer personally. So joining on from Dragon Army, it's definitely been a learning experience and figuring out, what are those behaviors that even if you weren't to define yourself as a gamer, we truly do have some of that gamer sense in us. So the potential of gaming. So right now, games are the #1 category on mobile in terms of time spent. So if you look at the time spent around our devices and you start to break things down, games come in at 32% of the time that consumers spend on their phones. Mobile gaming industry is expected to grow $54 billion in this year alone. More than 91% of kids 2 to 17 are playing games on their phones and tablets. Not incredibly surprising. When you start to look at the demos, though, the average gamer in the U.S. right now is 28 years old. So I know I personally would have considered your average gamer to be that 14-year-old boy in mom or dad's basement. Not necessarily the case anymore. 50% of gamers today are also female, so that only continues to grow. You're definitely seeing growth in that mom demographic as well, starting to, like I said, creep up a little bit older, and gaming really becomes something that's accessible to the masses now instead of more of a niche behavior. And if you look at where in terms of money being spent today in the mobile arena, 80% of that money today is spent within games. Now, if you look at the types of gamers that spend within games, of course, it's always a small portion of your overall demographic of who's playing your game, but it's looking at the behaviors intimately of those players and figuring out how can we expand those and move them beyond that smaller subset. So what makes this so addictive? So this is actually a screenshot from Defend the Dam. And a lot of what we do in our practice here is understanding what is it about a game that makes it interesting and what can we learn from it. So an example that we found with Defend the Dam is, for instance, and Adam, you mentioned not being able to get past that final level. So one of the things that we look at specifically within our behaviors of our users are things like when a user gets to a particular level and the drop-off rate either drops off or continues on, what can we learn about those groups of players? So for instance, if a player is to drop off in level 2, but another group of players is to continue on through level 4 or 5, what are the behaviors that are different between those two groups? So we're starting to look at demographics a little bit differently. We're starting to look at behavioral data a little bit differently and learning what makes these experiences just so sticky, whereas marketers just haven't quite been able to get a grasp on that as frequently as games can. So what we've started to do is identify some of the triggers, and just for today, I know we're looking at a shortened time today, so I'll just go through a couple of these. But what we've developed is starting to pull out what are the triggers, what are the mechanics in games that really start to create an experience that's worth sticking around for. I know in the past we oftentimes related ourselves to the word gamification. We try to stay far away from that one in particular because we believe when it comes to game theory, it's not necessarily just taking one of these things that makes an experience really great, but it's starting to pile them together, to match them up, to figure out what's the balance that we create within an experience so that it does become an experience that people want to stick around for and engage with. So this is just a sample of 9 of the triggers that we have at our disposal today. And I wouldn't say that these are things, even when we went to the game studio and started talking about this and how we could relate this to marketing, that there was any sort of handbook that we were looking at. So these are just some of the things that we've started to pull out. And like I said, I'm just going to go through a couple of them to show you how these start to come to life and translate from a game perspective into a real life standpoint. So the first one we'll get into here is community objectives. So community objectives is the idea that I'm working with a group of people to accomplish something bigger than myself. So the first example of this, and probably the best example of this that we've seen out in the marketplace today, is Clash of Clans. Of course, the biggest game that's out there right now, pulling in $1.54 million a day in revenue, 170,000 installs daily, and 5.5 million daily active users. Now, one of the ways that Clash of Clans has been so successful is that it's not just a single-player game in the sense where I can go in, create my clan, create my land, and be able to kind of work it on my own. The way that they've made this really addictive and encourage people to come back, and they use pretty much every single one of these mechanics we can probably relate to Clash of Clans, but community objectives is really strong for them. So the ability to pair up with other clans, to pair up with other people so that the damage that you do, the different strikes that you're going out on become that much more impactful. So working together makes that much of a difference. A great brand example of this, and I'm going to flip back and forth between some of these and actually Nike's running app. If you guys haven't used it, we feel like this is probably the best example of a branded experience out there today that relates really easily. So an example of community objectives within the Nike running app is the ability to share these achievements and motivation with others. So if you've ever finished a run within the Nike app, you can go in and directly share it out with your friends, share directly to your Facebook feed, be one of those people that's constantly talking about how frequently you're running. But one of the cool things that they do is the ability to share your run route with others. So if you go into the Nike Plus dashboard, you can actually see the routes that I've run, routes that are most popular, and who's completed that route most frequently. So it encourages your community to kind of join in and to be a part of something bigger than yourself. The next example that I want to get into is a little bit around social competition. So this one's pretty self-explanatory, but the ability to compete against one another within a game space. A game that's done this incredibly well is another one that I hope you've heard of, Candy Crush Saga. So Candy Crush today is pulling in $1 million a day in revenue, $120,000 a day in installs, and 9.7 million daily active users. And Candy Crush is no different than any of those other block games that you may have played in the past. But the one thing that they've done that's made this game so unique, and I don't have a screenshot of it on this slide, but it's the map and where you're competing with your friends. So if you've played Candy Crush in the past, you may have noticed that board that you moved through. So you're not only completing objectives for things like high scores or level completion, but you're completing for how far did I get in that level? What were the other objectives that I accomplished? What were the players that I played against? So now it's pulling in information from your friends, and I can see that my friend Jeff, for instance, is at level 20, and I'm only at level 2, and I really want to get past him. Or maybe we have completed the same amount of levels, but I can see how well he did in those levels. So it really encourages you to continue on not only competing against yourself within the game, but competing against others. Again, kind of a Nike example here of how they do this really well is the leaderboard amongst their community members. So if any of you out there have used the Nike running app, you can see kind of the challenges that reset monthly, and you can see who's leading as far as the amount of miles that you've completed month over month. I know for me personally as a runner, this is a huge motivating factor for me, and that's an interesting piece that we found from the game theory to marketing side as well, is what's going to motivate one user isn't necessarily going to motivate another. And this is where kind of layering in and using those multiple tactics starts to come to life in a really interesting way. So while I may be motivated by a leaderboard, somebody else may be motivated by unlocking different achievements, for instance. And then finally, the last example that I'll go through today is limited time events. And limited time events, I think, out of this list, maybe along with variable reward structure, is probably the most interesting to me as a marketer. So I think oftentimes as limited time events, we think of a sale or a promotion or something that I can offer that's only going to be around for a shortened period of time. And that's not really the way that we think about it within the game structure. So I'll go through some examples of how we think about this a little bit differently. So on the game side, so this is an example of The Simpsons Tapped Out. Again, another really successful game in terms of revenue, installs, and daily active users. But Simpsons Tapped Out does something really interesting when it comes to holidays and seasonal events they have going on. So as you can see in this screenshot, not only is the world turned to Christmas, but if I were to show you an interactive kind of gameplay version of what's going on in this world, you start to pick up different characters and different objects based on your play. So for instance, there is a character that you can pick up or that you could have picked up last Christmas called Frosty the Hitman. So Frosty the Hitman has a little bit of a Christmas-themed play to him, but you could pick up Frosty during the Christmas time only if you played during that seasonal window. Now the cool thing here is that Frosty's going to stick around and he's going to play in your world no matter if it's June or if it's December. So that's where it becomes really interesting, is he doesn't leave. So an interesting way to think about this, if we were to apply it, and I'll apply it to Nike in just a second, but think about, for instance, the Starbucks pumpkin spice latte. We know that people go crazy over PSL every fall. What if you ordered that pumpkin spice latte so many times during the month of October that you unlocked it year-round? And whenever you came in to Starbucks, say it's January, it's June, it's August, you could order that pumpkin spice latte. Now that would be something really interesting as a reward for the person next to you to say, oh, I like one of those as well. And then the answer becomes no. You have to stick around and be a loyal user and be a loyal member for us during a particular time frame so that you can earn this really unique reward. So an example of how Nike's done this within the Nike Running app is the unlocking with motivation of friends and the community around Nike. So if you see, there are things within the app called challenges. So you're able to complete these limited time events where you basically compete against friends. So again, example of how we're using multiple tactics at once here to create a really interesting experience. But there's basically a challenge where you go in and say, hey, between my friends, in this example, Katie, Jessica, Jean, we're going to go out and create a challenge where in the next 5 days, we want to see who's the fastest to run 20 miles. So it creates a new type of limited time event for these users. So kind of wrapping this up, how do we take applied game theory and mobile engagement and bring the two together? So this is definitely the most difficult part of the process, right? It's easy to talk about tactics and how they exist within the world. But like I said, the important part is layering these things together and really figuring out the balance that we create within an experience. So we kind of relate this back to 3 tenets. So the first one here is to be simple. We know that mobile experiences shouldn't be complicated. I think one of the first exercises that our team always goes through is getting all of the ideas down on paper and then pulling as many out as possible. So we want to be able to move quickly to test and to iterate. So if that means getting out the smallest version of the product we can, testing it with a group of users, getting feedback, that's typically the route that we'll take in creating some of these engagements. The second piece here is to be imaginative, seeking solutions through new platforms, partners, and content. So looking at, what are different APIs, what are different access points that we can use, what are different things that we can layer on top of and build to get that really small product out there and to create something that may create some traction for a brand. And then finally, be entertaining, and this is probably the strongest influence from the game side, but I think oftentimes as marketers, like I said at the very beginning, we're guilty of meeting the objective first and foremost and letting the entertainment or the fun side fall by the wayside. And that's what games have done so well. There is no reward in it for me playing the game other than I'm getting enjoyment out of it. Other than it's something fun, it's an escape, it's a way to get away from my day. So imagine if we were to create brand experiences that were so entertaining and so fun that people did want to come back to them. So this is really where game theory starts to become really important for us, is creating experiences that both serve and entertain the user. So we want to make sure that we're driving peers and loyal engagement and setting up those objectives in the upfront of what does engagement mean for us. Does it mean engagement over a 7-day period? Is it something where we want people to come back over the course of a year? And really setting up those metrics in the upfront so that we can determine what success looks like for us down the road. So that's a little bit of all I have to share today. I know that that was just kind of a peek under the hood of what we're doing over here at Dragon Army, the types of experiences that we create. But we're excited about the future of mobile. We're excited about where this is headed. And we're excited to see what marketers start to create and the different experiences as we start to move into a world where mobile is not just in its infancy, but it's grown, it's developed, and it's pushing us to do new things and to create new experiences for our brands and for our consumers. So that's about all I have, and thanks, Adam, for letting us join and kind of share a little bit of our vision, and hope to see you guys again in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kaitlyn. That was really great. Some really good ideas there. I love the pumpkin latte idea. That makes total sense. I would be a huge fan of that. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing these insights, and we'll talk to you soon.
Great, thanks so much.